A Redress of Grievances. I was interested in this news story here by the Washington Post. This really deserves a full video, but at the same time, it's hard for me to defend the actions of the 50 people who stormed the Capitol and the Senate building on January 6, 2021. But at the same time, I wanted to examine the arbitrary standards that are used to throw the book at non-Democrat protesters and how judges and the law treat Democrat protesters. Let's begin with reading what this U.S. District Judge Tanya S. Chutkan said. She said here, in sentencing a January 6 rioter, that she sentenced this man to 45 days in jail and $500 restitution for damage done to the Capitol building. Now, what's interesting is she is charging this man for the actions of other people. She's charging him for the actions of what she says is the mob. We've never seen such a standard applied to any Democrat mob, any Democrat protest, any Democrat group of rioters. You never would see someone blamed for what other people in the mob do. But this judge created a new legal standard exclusively for what would appear to be Trump supporters. She says that they were a violent mob seeking to overthrow the lawfully elected government. Problem is, look here, this is the estimated 100,000 to 250,000 peaceful Trump supporters who showed up in our nation's capital on January 6, 2021 to attend the Save America rally and to peacefully hear President Donald Trump's speech where he asked them to peacefully have their voices heard and to peacefully protest the certification of the election happening at the opposite end of the Washington Mall at the Capitol. If you look at this crowd, if this crowd of people really did what that judge says and attempted an insurrection, folks, there would not be a single Democrat or rhino left in Washington, D.C. at this moment if this crowd that you're looking at right here had attempted sedition or an insurrection. That is a complete lie. So it's interesting that this judge adopts the precise rhetoric and statements of the Democratic Party officials such as Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the Democrats running the January 6 committees. So when you have a judge that adopts the precise rhetoric of the prosecutor, what sort of chance does this defendant have? So look at the crimes he's accused of. He posted photos of himself on Facebook. And look at this. This should be more frightening than anything this man did. Other parents in his youth sports league identified him to the FBI, court records state. So this is something that happens in Stalinist show trials or during a Maoist self-confession in communist China, where other people are rewarded for turning in people who are subversive to the state. This is not something that is traditionally part of our American culture, where you inform on people and expect a reward. He was arrested and fired from his job with Synergy One Lending. So you would think that simply attending the January 6th event there at the Capitol and getting fired from your job, wouldn't that be enough of a punishment? No. So let's scroll down here. He's forced to give an abject apology, just like in a Stalinist show trial, where the outcome is preordained. And, you're going to get a bullet to the head at the end of the Stalin's show trial. He has to make a forced confession here and apologizes to the country and the police officers. Now, you have to wonder, what is this man's crime? He was ordered to pay $500 restitution for damage done to the Capitol building. Scroll down and find where he actually did that. Judge Chutkan says this here. She noted that Mazzocco had only been in the Capitol for 12 minutes, that he did not inflict any damage, and that he had urged other people not to cause any damage. So wait a minute. This judge just lied here. $500 restitution for damage done to the Capitol building. She sentenced him for something he did not do. He did not inflict any damage. This is the judge herself giving two contradictory statements. Now look at this. The judge received letters from Mazzocco's friends and family saying he had wandered into the Capitol out of impulse and curiosity. In the old Soviet Union, you needed permit papers to travel from one province to another. When did this become a crime to travel freely in the United States of America? According to this judge, he committed a crime simply by traveling to Washington, D.C. He learned about the protest. He bought an airplane ticket. He got on a plane with the intent of coming to Washington. That's a crime? Not when Democrats protest and riot and occupy government buildings. Let's take a look at some examples. Alright, this is 10 years ago. Democrats in the state of Wisconsin, angry that Republican Governor Scott Walker was fulfilling his legal duty and obligations, they illegally occupied the state rotunda building. They shoved armed police out of the way. Now, what's different about this from the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol? None of these people were shot in the throat by police officers for illegally entering and occupying the state rotunda. Look at all these police here. Why aren't any of these Democrats being shot in the throat as soon as these police see them storming the Wisconsin Capitol rotunda? The reason is simple. Democrat protesters have special rights. There are two sets of laws in our country. One set of laws for Democrat protesters. They can occupy any government building they want, and they can expect not to be physically harmed. They can expect not to be shot in the throat like Ashley Babbitt. They can expect to be treated with special rights and privileges that are actually outlined in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Most people are not aware of this, but let's go take a look here at the First Amendment to the Constitution. Now, most people are familiar with the first part of the First Amendment, but read to the end. What are the last few words of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution? And to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This is the basic right of every American. You don't have to send a polite letter. You can petition the government in person for a redress of grievances, which is precisely what the protesters in Wisconsin did. They petitioned the government for a redress of grievances as outlined in the First Amendment, and they did this in person. They didn't send a telegram. They didn't send an email. They didn't tweet. They didn't send smoke signals. They showed up in person and said, we are going to let you know of our right to occupy this government building. Now, you might be saying at this point, sure, that's a state rotunda building. That's not the nation's capital. Is there a different standard for occupying the Capitol, for occupying the Senate building, and for stopping the business of the U.S. government in the Senate building? Remember, this judge was very specific. Look at what she determined just from this man's trial. According to the judge, to compare the actions of people protesting, mostly peacefully, for civil rights to those of a violent mob seeking to overthrow the lawfully elected government is a false equivalency. So right here, she has somehow determined that this man who was posting photos on Facebook was attempting to overthrow the government. She says it's a violent mob, but she can't cite any violence that he himself conducted. So he didn't destroy any Senate property. He didn't conduct any violence. He urged other people not to be violent. And she threw the book at him because he appeared to be part of the mob, and therefore, in her view, he was guilty. So let's see if there's a different standard if you invade the Capitol and interfere with the business of the government in 2018. This is Amy Schumer. She is a Democrat. She is the cousin of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. In 2018, she and her associates illegally stormed and entered the U.S. Senate building while it was conducting government business. Precisely the circumstances of the January 6th so-called insurrection. What's the difference? Well, first of all, you'll notice the Capitol Police did not pull out a gun and shoot Amy Schumer in the throat, even though she's unarmed, just like Ashley Babbitt was unarmed when she was shot in the throat on January 6th. So here, the Capitol Police, they're all told that these are Democrat protesters and these are Democrat occupiers. When you are a Democrat occupier and you occupy a government building, you can shut down the business of the government. The Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court confirmation hearing came to a complete stop. They ushered everybody out of the room. Amy Schumer did not receive any sort of charge like this man did by this judge. What's the difference? This man was charged with not being a Democrat, apparently. It's a very simple principle. Equal justice under law. We now have federal judges who do not believe in the very words that are the basis for law and order in our country. This judge, who sentenced the January 6th insurrectionists, does not believe in equal justice under the law. There is one set of rules for non-Democrat occupiers of government buildings, and there's another set of rules for Democrat occupiers of government buildings. You can expect to not be charged with anything, and certainly not get shot in the throat if you're a Democrat. So, when did our country become a place where there are two different sets of laws and the Constitution is not applied equally to every American? Now, I was told this guy is not worth defending, but what bothers me is how this judge appears to have already determined her ruling before the trial even started. She was under orders to deliver the result that the Democratic Party sought, and she delivered the result that the Democratic Party ordered. The proof in this is simply in how Amy Schumer and her friends got to disrupt the business of the federal government. They halted the business of the federal government that day, and none of them received the same ire, prosecutions, and prison terms that these people did this year. What's the difference? The difference is there have to be consequences for participating in an attempted violent overthrow of the government beyond sitting at home. The message is, if you are a Republican, Libertarian, or non-Democrat, judges like this are telling you, by her precise words, you do not have the right to protest. You do not have the right to occupy government buildings. You do not have the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances, as outlined in the First Amendment. And the rights that the Democratic Party accrues to themselves do not apply to the rest of us. So, yes, maybe this man is not that defensible, but he should be, because tomorrow it may be you standing in front of a judge like this, who, like a Stalinist show trial, already has the verdict and the judge's speech written ahead of time. Thank you.